We are here excited to continue on with the second day of MIXI. And now we're excited to introduce the IATI's annual Israel Life Science Industry Report. Omer Gavish, partner and pharmaceuticals and life science leader at PwC, will guide us through this comprehensive overview, highlighting key insights and trends shaping the industry. And I want to say it's continuity and annual comparisons and long-term perspective make this report the most thorough examination of the Israeli life science industry available currently in Israel and in the world. So I'm excited to introduce Omer Gavish. Omer, please.
First of all, as Amala said, my name is Omer Gavish. I'm a partner and the pharma life science leader at PwC Israel. And in the next 15 minutes or so, I will present the highlights of the IATI 2023-2024 annual Life Science Industry Report. The Life Science Industry Report, published by IATI, is a collaboration between IATI and PwC for 7 years now. It's the most comprehensive report that this industry has in the last few years. We had a report, like an update report, about 6 months ago, and IATI and ourselves made a lot of efforts to be able to present to you the most current information, including some insights and some highlights of the 2024 funding and situation as of today. We can see here in the next slide some information that is actually current until really the end of February. And I think that this collaboration and this report, being able to work again on this with Yaakov, with Karin, with IATI and the whole team, it's a great honor. And I want to walk you through, again, just the highlights of what we have. Some of you maybe have seen earlier this week just a couple of slides that I will show here again. It was in the press, a lot of public relationships around that. So you might have some ideas, and we will dive into more details in the next slides. So let's go a little bit into numbers. As of today, there are approximately 1,800 active life science companies in Israel. This is in various subsectors, in various areas, and out of these companies, about 53 companies were established during 2023. However, almost the same amount of number of companies ceased operation on the same year, meaning that if we think about the last 2-3 years, the number of companies operating is almost the same, no significant changes in the total number of companies. We can see that the 53 companies established represents a sharp decrease compared to what we had in last year, so 51% decrease. This is coming mainly from one subsector, which is the digital health. We can see that later on in the report. And overall, the same number of companies, as I said, ceased operation, again, more or less in the same areas. Companies in the industries employ about 80,000 employees, and I'm talking here about direct employment of employees. Is this? Okay, thank you. And I'm talking about direct employment of those employees. I hope this is better now. We think and believe that in the broader circles, we talk about a lot of more employees, and I think that this is just one figure that shows the importance of this industry to the Israeli economy and the contribution of those 1,800 companies to the industry and economy in Israel. Diving into the subsectors, actually there's no significant change to what you might have seen in the last few years. So thinking about subsectors, there are 4 main subsectors, and the percentage or how we see the industry didn't change much in the last few years. After an increase in the digital health section in the last 3 years, I would say, typically or mainly following the COVID-19 crisis, we see that it's pretty stable. Medical device is still the largest one, followed by digital health and then biotechnology and pharmaceuticals. And if we think about stages, the industry has always been pretty much in early stages. So most of the companies are in seed and R&D stages. This is mainly because the R&D stage in the life science industry is long. So for pharmaceutical companies, for biotechnology companies, it can take years. We've seen companies being in this stage for more than 15 years sometimes. So this is almost 60% of the industry, with initial revenue and revenue growth representing the 40%. And again, this is typically the situation in the last, I would say, at least 5 years with no significant change. This is a very interesting and important slide in my mind. So IATI is putting a lot of attention in the last few years on where those companies are located, trying to put some efforts and to make companies being more in the peripheral areas, try to contribute to Israel, not only in the center. However, as we can see, 60% of the companies are still in the center of Israel. Most of them are located in Tel Aviv, Rehovot Nes Ziona, Herzliya, Ra'anana. The remaining 40 are all around the other areas. And again, most of them, if we think, are still in bigger cities like Haifa and Jerusalem. It's interesting to see that even though there are some benefits being outside of the center, so beneficial area A, for example, that we see in the north and in the south, less than 50% of the companies choose to put their headquarters or activity in these areas. And this is mainly because companies still want to be close to hospitals, to universities, to knowledge hubs. If we think about the more traditional industry, and if we think about the digital health, they are competing with other technology companies, and they still need to be in the center. We all know that technology companies basically sit, most of them in Tel Aviv. So we can see that those benefits are helping, but not enough. The next few slides are related to funding, and I will try to talk just about the highlights. So as we can see, $2.2 billion were invested in Israeli companies during 2023. This is a drop of about 40% compared to prior year and more than 50% compared to the year before. It's hard to say that it's surprising. I think we all know the causes for that. 2023 started with the background of a global financial crisis, the political situation here in Israel, and then from the fourth quarter, the Iron Swords War. We will dive a little bit more into that in just to see the 2023. But again, this is not a good sign for the industry. We will talk about 2024 in a minute. Talking about the private funding, out of that 2.2 billion, so 1.7 came from private funding to private companies mainly. We see about the same decrease, the same as the total funding, a little bit sharper. It's interesting to see that not only the total funding decreased, but the number of transactions decreased in about the same level, meaning that after 4 years or so of increase in the average deal size that we've seen since 2020, we do see a decrease, but it's not as sharp as we've seen in the total funding. So it's still around the 11 million per deal, which is pretty similar to the last 2 years. So the overall deal size didn't change too much. This is the breakdown of 2023, and I just wanted to show that because I think it shows what everyone thought. The last quarter, basically almost no activity, very few deals, lower average deal size. And the reason for that is not only the willing of investors to take a risk and invest in the environment that we live in, but also the availability of the companies. We are aware to CEOs, CFOs, people within the companies that just weren't available to finalize funding rounds, weren't available to talk to investors and put a lot of things on hold. It's not only we see here funding, but it's R&D efforts and other things as well that was put on hold. I will go quicker on these two slides. This is just a breakdown. I will not dive into that, of the breakdown between Israeli investors and foreign investors. The foreign investors are still the majority of the funding resources for Israeli companies. The decrease in Israeli investors or money coming from Israeli investors is a little bit sharper than the foreign ones, but not significantly. And we can see here that the Israeli companies are heavily based on funding, which is backed by VCs. We can see that the picture changed dramatically in the last decade, and if it was almost the same just 10 years ago in 2014, Starting from 2018, we can see a trend of more and more investments coming from the VCs, and basically today, around 80% of the funding is coming from VC-backed funding. This is maybe one of the optimistic slides in the report that we have. So unlike the general trend of funding, private funding, we can see that Israeli companies traded in US stock exchanges has increased their activity compared to prior year. It is well known, I think, that Israeli companies are looking at the US markets as one of the most important funding resources. The really minimal activity that we've seen last year was devastating for some of them. And we can see an increase of about almost double. All of it is coming from follow-on offerings. We do see even some activity in 2024. So $10 million were raised, $2 million in 2 transactions. It is important to note, this is the 2024 data that we have is not indicative. It's hard to say by a few weeks how the year is going to look like. However, when we speak to investors, when we speak to bankers, when we speak to the companies themselves, there is some optimism on how 2024 is going to look, especially for those companies traded in the US, not only for those that are already traded, but for companies that looking to have IPOs, M&As, or any other ways to be able to tap into these markets. So I hope that these optimistic lookout will actually happen. The next two slides are something that is new for this report. So this year, as you can see recently, February, so this is information that came in the last week. IATI had a survey among the top VCs and funding investment companies in Israel. And we wanted to understand what is their take and how they look at 2024. So I'm not going to get into all the questions and all the information. We picked 2 slides that I think that are interesting. So the first one, we asked them, how is the Iron Sword War is going to impact on what you planned for 2024? So when in the middle of 2023 or towards a little bit later, when those companies, when those VCs look at 2024, is there any change in their decision? And 59 said no. So they're still looking at 2024 sort of on the same way that they did just a few months ago before the war started. And this is, to me, again, something that is a little bit optimistic, and I hope that it will actually happen. Another question that we asked is, what are going to be the challenges for the companies, for private companies looking for coming into 2024? So, as you can see, the main one by far is funding. This is not something that is typically or unique for 2024. I guess this is for every year, but probably going to be a little bit more challenging this year. The go-to-market approach is always important. Recruiting of people, which is, to me, interesting. And then international collaboration, and we try to figure out, does that relate to the situation? And the answer is yes. There is a fear that because of things that are going on here in Israel, companies will struggle having international collaboration and clinical trials. The last slide I want to present is a lookout. So one of the partners in writing this report is the Israeli Innovation Authority. And together we try to figure out what are the rising sectors, what are the growth vectors for the life science industry in the coming years. So we can see that neurotech, fertility, AI for drug discovery, bioconvergence, digital health, of course. All of these are subsectors within the subsectors that we discussed about that we think are going to be the growth engine of the industry, in addition, obviously, to all other companies that are already operating. And we will try to elaborate on those in the future in other reports. This was a summary and just the highlights of the report. The report, as I said, is very, very comprehensive. Again, a lot of information, a lot of data. This was effort to get you the most current information as of last week. I hope that you'll find it interesting. It's supposed to be next week, I believe. It's going to be next week, Kari? Next week on the IATI website, together with other slides as well for information. So I encourage you to go in and review that, and thank you very much.